unconventional in that we are discussing great classics. And many of those classics that I selected as my top choices are from the 19th century, with a few from the 20th century.
Great. So we're having 11 classic pieces of literature by Don Masse, teacher, 41 years, and college professor. So he's going to give us his top 11 best classics that he recommends for readers. The first of which he listed is Therese Raquin. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I put that in as a kind of tough type of selection, dark horse, by Émile Zola, a great thinker in France in the mid-19th century, who was the French society, which was very conservative. And Zola wrote Teresa Raquin, which shows the damage done to people by poor environment and by other things that happen, the lack of a middle class. So Teresa goes through a lot of problems, and somehow she gets through it, but those around her do not. So I read this months ago, but yeah.
Sounds like a desperate struggle for survival.
Yes, it is. Yeah, by the great Zola. The more famous book he's written is called Nana, but I won't get into that.
Okay, well, thank you. That's a great start, and I don't think that's a book a lot of people have heard of. So let's move on to one that you will like as well, and that's The Idiot. Who writes that? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Fyodor Dostoevsky wrote The Idiot, and it's one of my favorite books. Prince Myskin, Natasha, whom he loves, her love, I cannot recall his name right now, so I don't want to mispronounce it, but it's quite an interesting triangle of love and death. So the Russians tend to intensify the emotions, and a little more perhaps than the British or the Americans. And therefore, The Idiot is one of my favorites, one of my favorite female characters, which deals with Natasha Filipponova's struggles and very sad life.
Wow. And there's an amazing ending to that story as well, which I won't give away, but is there anything you wanted to say about that?
Well, yes, the ending is perhaps anticipated, but you don't know exactly when that's going to fall, So there's a wedding involved there, and things go awry. So it's just in this society, the upper class society, when things go awry, sometimes you can't reclaim it. And Prince Myskin is a fabulous character. He's a little bit autistic, so the reader should know that. He's a guy who's made his mark in the Russian society, but has been dragged down by poor choices for love.
Wow, that does sound interesting. When you say that, it makes me want to pick that one right up.
Yeah, it's a well-known work and is still very popular among the elite readers.
Great. So that was right around 1870 Russia.
Yes,
Yeah,
maybe a little before.
And there's another parallel time period with that in America going on at the same time with Mark Twain's famous Huckleberry Finn. And I noticed you have that as your number 3. Can you tell us why that's on your list?
Yes, that's not necessarily ranked 1 through 3.
Okay.
It's just the top 10 or 11.
Okay.
Huckleberry Finn captures the essence of the southern dialect along the Mississippi River in about 1860. And that is a fascinating study of the picturesque life. And Twain's able to put a comedic sense to it.
Yeah.
So it's a great story. Also, I want to comment that it shows the horrible effects of slavery but diluted by the humor of Tom Sawyer, which is very controversial. Huckleberry Finn was a character who maybe wasn't as smart as Tom Sawyer, but he had a sense of moral righteousness. And Tom Sawyer was just a typical kid, like my grandson Liam.
Okay. Well, that's really neat that you can see your modern day grandkids in these boys, and I think that's why a lot of America considers them, along with you, as some of the best of all time. So I couldn't share that even more with you. I love that book so much. The next book you have listed is still often, I think, on the high school list of best reads, and that's Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. Tell us a little about that.
Well, that's one of my favorite books. I taught that novel, for about 12 years. It captures the country life of the upper middle class in England, and that includes characters like the Lintons, who are challenged by a wayfish type of guy from India named Heathcliff, who plots revenge against the Linton family, is able to partially steal Linton's wife, Catherine, who was his step-sister or foster sister. And it's very passionate. It's somewhat controlled due to the mores of the day. So it's not like it was written 2015.
Right, it's set in 1850 England or so, and a lot of Gothic imagery, it sounds like.
Yes, it does have that, and it has religious symbolism, references to the Bible by the servant Joseph, who is portrayed very well.
Wonderful.
So there's a series of characters involved in sort of a revenge story.
Now, why are the Brontes so famous? Why did the Brontes make your list?
Well, one thing they were able to do is create a character that I really identified with the females that I pursued when I was young. Catherine Earnshaw, who became Catherine Linton, who was really a Catherine Heathcliff, was one of these confused types of females that I often put on a pedestal, oddly enough, because they had a great range of emotion, and they were very intelligent. So my own life was a little similar to Catherine Earnshaw.
That's neat that a lot of people can relate to those writings so well even today, and that's why you think that they're up there with the top greatest books of all time.
Oh yes, it's a magnificent book, and again, I won't give the ending. I'm hoping some of them will read that, but it was one of my favorites. One that didn't make the list, which is by her sister, Charlotte Bronte, was Jane Eyre.
I wondered, okay.
But that's in my secondary list.
Okay, well, that's really good to know that made, after 11, still top 20. Now, the next one you have on here is Return of the Native by Thomas Hardy. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that is, again, that's a tragic story set in the Heath Country of England, a pastoral novel. But it shows the great emotions of the upper middle class in that country, and great characters, great passion by Michael Wildey, and his love, who Eustacia By, and everything comes undone for them. And there are more wholesome characters in it, like Plym Yeobright and Thomason. It's all put in a setting that's beautifully rendered in England.
Small villages, very
small
quaint
villages,
society.
The Reddleman, and all kinds of different things and habits that they had. The dye was very important, and one of the characters is called a Reddleman, who goes around the countryside and sells dyes for whatever reason. So I found that to be a disturbing. It's a dark film, but or dark story, but quite well done.
Now, was it made into film as well?
Yes, it is, and most of these that are made into film are not anywhere on the level of the actual writing. So many of these classics don't come out real well, or they're tampered with.
Right, that's what I noticed as well.
So one has to really read through it, enjoy it, and get the twists, etc., and the ironies.
Very true. Well, the next on your list is The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway.
Yes, it has one of my favorite characters, Robert Cohen, who's a writer. He's not really a Hemingway hero, though. He's kind of argumentative and is a pugilist. And he gets in an argument with the Jake Barnes group that are the Hemingway types. You know, they don't like to argue much, and if they do, they make up. But Cohen is a fascinating character, and he is trying to get a character named Ashley, Lady Brett Ashley, and she's a poor choice for him, but he doesn't understand that.
That's neat that the reader has a sense for that, whereas you don't see that Robert figures that out for a while.
No, he doesn't figure it out for a while. Also, it's set in France and in Spain with the bullfights and all, and that falls into the plot. So it's got some really fascinating qualities to it. It may not be as good as some of the other Hemingway books, but I selected it because I liked Robert Cohen.
So you selected that one based upon one of your favorite all-time characters.
Yes, yes.
And that's important. If somebody was to want another Hemingway book that is even greater, what might you say about them? What might they read?
Oh, well, the great ones, of course, The Old Man and the Sea was a masterpiece of symbolism, and the sharks are really people in society. So there's a lot of that imagery in The Old Man and the Sea. We go through the transformations of life from, we see him as a young man to mostly an older man that's trying to just survive. But Hemingway does a good job of describing the shark, the sea, etc. Other books worthy of consideration are, of course, A Farewell to Arms, and also For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Good.
Now, I read To Have and Have Not, and I thought it had some great nature description in it, but its choice of characters were people that basically hung out in bars, they were rich, and lived in Key West, Florida, or vacationed there. So I wasn't impressed by the quality of the characters. Robert Cohen was a more sincere type of character that had some ideals, and he wouldn't have fit into To Have and Have Not.
Was this written before To Have and Have Not? I think it was, probably.
Yes, yes.
So he had a few more ideals as a writer then, too, probably.
Yes, he may have. He may have. It's hard to figure out Hemingway, you know.
Oh, that's true.
He's in a world of his own.
It's true. Well, the next three you have are some of my favorites, so I'm excited to hear you tell us next about Great Expectations by Charles Dickens.
Well, that's a fantastic book. I love the dual ending where Dickens came up with an ending, his friends didn't like it, so he changed the ending. I think to some extent he ruined the end of Great Expectations, but be that as it may, sometimes writers give in to other people. And I'm trying to write books and write a trilogy now, and that is challenging because there's mockery in it, and it's got a little Dickens-esque quality to it, perhaps. Now, the list of characters in Great Expectations is famous. Miss Havisham, Pip, Mrs. Joe Gargery, just a whole list of fascinating British characters.
I love that
and
Joe
I
Gargery.
believe Uriah Heep is in that. Is he? Do you recall that?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember that either, but there were a couple villains in it. And then a book that I did not put on my list, but deserves, or may have been in my supplementary list, was David Copperfield.
That's what I was thinking. If there was another book, Uriah Heep might be in that book. But I really like to hear you talk a little bit about the love story between Pip and Miss Havisham's, was it her granddaughter?
Well, yes, Estella, and I think you're correct that Uriah Heep is probably a character in David Copperfield, as I recall that. The villains in Great Expectations, I'm not sure there's a central villain, but at any rate, this girl
this way as we chat.
I have trouble.
As we chat, let's turn it this way. Okay, so Miss Havisham is really what? Miss Havisham is really one of the villains, I think, in the book.
To some extent, she's a confused woman that had been cheated out of her marriage by a character named Magwitch. And, she was always dressed in her wedding gown. So it's a classic piece of writing.
That's awesome. I'm so glad.
Description.
Oh, that's great. Hello, I'm Don's daughter. Okay, so we have here, the next book is going to be The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne.
Yes. A brilliant piece of American writing set in Salem, Massachusetts, in the actually going back to about the 1680s, around the time of the Salem witchcraft trial. And, great characters like Hester Prynne, her husband, older husband, Roger Chillingworth, and her lover, the minister, Arthur Dimmesdale.
Right.
It's really very symbolic, and we're not supposed to take it really literally, but Hawthorne was a master of style, of early 19th century style. So we can gain from writing by looking at that.
That's really neat. Even the names he used are Chillingworth sends a shiver down your spine, and Scarlet Letter, and Dimmesdale. Do you think Dimmesdale was named so because he wasn't that bright?
No, it's just that his star had gone out when he got involved in the romance with Hester Prynne, and these were all confused symbols fighting it out. They were not really characters, so it's not like the girl that interrupted us here. She wasn't a symbol,
Right.
She's real, but these were more symbols struggling.
I like that. There's a little bit of drama even in our story as we're hearing. That's kind of an interesting twist. We've got a little plot here.
Yeah.
So, but no, I really like hearing you talk about that because even as I taught that book to my own high school literature class a few years ago, I think that's a reminder for me when I'm teaching as well, and when others are learning that there's a lot more symbolism than we all often give credit. So the next book you have on your list is Uncle Tom's Cabin by Carrie Beecher Stowe. Tell us about that.
Yeah, there's a tremendous scene in it where the runaway slave woman, Eliza, desperate to come to see her husband, who's also run away in the South, escapes on an ice floe, and it's a tremendous scene,
Yeah.
as the woman struggles to get across the Ohio River to Cincinnati, Ohio, and freedom.
Yeah.
So I put it in there because I still think it has relevance to the modern society with all the struggles they go through and the various arguments between the law and order people and the groups that espouse Black Lives Matter. So it is a very interesting way to lead into some of these issues. And there are some famous characters in it also. Uncle Tom, Simon Legree, and some others.
Little Evangeline.
Yes, Little Eva. And so it's worth reading. It's very hard to read. It's extremely emotional. It was written around 1850, before the Civil War, and created a stir in the South.
Right. She was the woman that Abraham Lincoln said when he met her, is this the little woman who started the big war, or rumored to have been the woman that was
Yes,
said about?
that was a concept that was, some say it's a myth, I don't know, but at any rate, she had a big impact, let's put it that way, on Northern readers. And in those days, many people read. They didn't have different technology we have. So many in the North, and certainly some in the South, read that book and debated it.
Very interesting. I like how they were sometimes sneaky with the way that they brought literature pieces into their government ideals and tried to change society.
Yes.
She was one of those as well as Mark Twain.
Yeah.
So the next one you have listed is In Dubious Battle by John Steinbeck.
Yeah, that's a sleeper. I read it before. I'm reading it again, and it's a book that portrays the struggle of communists in 1930 California trying to organize their groups. And it is not personally my favorite, but Steinbeck got into a lot of these controversial topics. He's better known for Grapes of Wrath and East of Eden. However, I think this book has a very good description, so I selected it as kind of like a surprise pick.
Well, that's neat. I like that. I never really heard much about that book. I enjoyed East of Eden and a little bit Grapes of Wrath, but I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah, and of Mice and Men, many people would have selected that, but that has been done so many times. I thought I'd go with In Dubious Battle. And I love the title,
That's true.
The fight is dubious, and it comes from John Milton's Paradise Lost, when the fallen archangel fights against God. So it has, and Milton, the Puritan, selected that term, in dubious battle, the clash in heaven.
Wow.
And it portrays good versus evil, and I think there is that aspect in dubious battle.
Wow, thank you. That's a wonderful clarification.
Yes.
So the last, number 11 on your top 11 is As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. Tell us about that.
Yes, after my wife died, I was, of course, mourning her, and my grandson said, "Have you read As I Lay Dying?" He saw the copy in the house, and I began to read it. It was the story of a Southern woman that was a school teacher in a rough family in Appalachia, and she wanted to be buried in her family's cemetery. And it's a fascinating account of not only her mind, but her husband's mind as he gets her ready, and they take her body and they transport it in the pouring rain, and they manage, I think, to get it to the town. So it is Faulkner's concept of the struggle for whatever we can in life, whatever we can try to change. So it is a great story.
Wonderful. That's a really captivating idea, and I'd like to read that book.
Yeah, I think you'd like the book.
There's some others that you had as possible, just at number 12, which we didn't want to get into that because we thought we would really try to capture the top 11. But if you had one or two that you really thought were 12s and 13s, what were those that were almost on the top 11?
Well, one that is the best of all time, I believe, is the Bible. But that's not really, that's in a separate category. I'm not a Bible scholar, but that has some of the greatest stories ever written. So I would recommend a reading of the Old and the New Testament.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I have gained from studying Paul's epistles. But again, I want to separate the religious writings from the basic other types of classes.
Well, that's great. Yeah, that's an excellent choice, the very best choice, as you said. And I see that you have Jane Austen as another possible. She's been my favorite female writer.
Yes, and she did make my list partly for that reason. So in Pride and Prejudice, there's a conflict between two characters that love each other, but they're very stubborn in their own personalities and narcissism. And so there's this is done very well by Austen, who captures the upper middle class life around the time of the 1830s. So she's excellent at that.
Yes, she is. And that's why I keep reading her books again and again. And another favorite for most people is To Kill a Mockingbird. And you said you didn't want to put that on your list quite the top 11 because of the controversy around the authorship.
Yes, I don't think that has ever been settled and probably never will be. But I think there's an issue there about how much did Truman Capote contribute to the book, and did Harper Lee rely on him for too much, let's say, writing rough drafts and things. I don't know the answer to that, but it's a very fine book, you know, that captures somewhat the prejudice of the South. Now, another book came out by Harper Lee, and some people felt that shouldn't even have been presented because it captures, it's almost like saying, well, the South had a right to control the destiny of African Americans. So that kind of goes against the original concept of To Kill a Mockingbird.
That makes sense. And so that makes sense why there's even more of a discrepancy between potentially those ideas in one author's mind. So that makes sense why you didn't include it. I love the book, but that makes sense. And it sounds like your criterion for selection was description of time, place, character development, reasonable structured plot, universal themes, generally positive effects, well-developed symbolism, good styles, exceptional plot twists, and evocative insights. So it's nice that you had some great criterion for selecting these books, and somebody who's looking to develop their education in the literary world would do well to consider these 11. And plus, I'll give a listing on the descriptions of this broadcast of his last 10 that were not on the top 11. So it's going to be a total of 21 recommended books by literary scholar John Masse. Do you have any final thoughts?
Well, yes, of course. There are great books that I did not put on the top 10 or 11. Ulysses by James Joyce is certainly one. Another one is the great masterpiece by the Russians, Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, which has fantastic descriptions of the upper class Russian life before the Russian Revolution. So certainly those are books that many people that get lists together would put at the very top. And one could go on and discuss B.H. Lawrence and other writers that certainly have affected me. And there's just a whole list of great writers, Stephen Crane, etc. So there are many fantastic writings, even going back to the early Robinson Crusoe and Tom Jones and The Vicar of Wakefield, which my wife liked, which is a smaller piece of writing about a minister's family. So there are a lot of choices out there, and but first you have to do some reading. You have to get something going, and you can't just sit back and say, well, I don't know what to choose. That's why people get lists together. So you can look at the lists and then take what you want from one critic and then what you want from another critic, and then, but you have to do your reading, and you can waste your time in reading trashy books. So you have to be careful there. A lot of books are on a poor level, and they're even used in high school teaching. And if you get involved in teaching those kinds of books, there aren't many positive rewards on that. One book that people laugh at, but a good one is Silas Marner by George Eliot. Just to throw that in. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I like that you brought up getting people to just start wherever they would like to out of the list. It's up to them. As long as they do some quality reading, the more and more they read, they will be better and better equipped to handle these larger works that will bring great reward. So wonderful. Thank you so much. I look forward to another time with you.
Yes, well, thank you very much for inviting me into this Starbucks coffee establishment and listening to their musical renditions while we are here. And it is a good place to do some writing. Perhaps not quite to the degree of it really hasn't been used as a extraordinary coffee house very often. It should be, but they like to keep things at a subdued level.
Right. So we shook it up a little bit, but we're having fun, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.